Hi and welcome. I'm Steve Martirano, and this is the Behavioral Corner. You're invited to hang with us as we discuss the ways we live today, the choices we make, the things we do, and how they affect our health and well-being. So you're on the corner, the Behavioral Corner. Please hang around a while. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Behavioral Corner. I'm Steve Martirano. You know, I'm hanging here on the corner, waiting for interesting people to show up. What we do is we talk about everything on the Behavioral Corner, because it is about everything that affects us psychologically, emotionally, physically, our mental health. So we have a pretty broad purview here on the corner. It's all made possible by our partners, Retreat Behavioral Health. You'll hear about them a little bit later down the road. We are going to talk about something that is all around us on an everyday basis. And sometimes it's not a problem. Sometimes you don't even notice that it's there. Other times you're overwhelmed by it. It is a consequence, I think, of living in the greatest consumer culture on earth. Lots of stuff, and a lot of it winds up in your basement. At least it has in my case, or on shelves, or in closets, or drawers. We're talking about clutter this time on the Behavioral Corner. So what do? We wait for some expert to come wandering past us, and we grab them by the arm, and we say, "Excuse me a second, are you not Betty Lennon, the decluttering guru?" And she is, as luck would have it. Betty Lennon, thanks for joining us. Betty is an author. She is a life coach. And as I said, she's our go-to person this time on the issue of clutter. Hi, Betty.
Hi, how are you?
Before I get to the meat and potatoes of this thing, you know the expression, one man's treasure is another man's trash.
Yeah.
So let's define our terms. When you or I talk about clutter, what are we talking about? What is clutter?
So when I talk about clutter, having been what I call myself now is a reformed collector, I say clutter is stuff that gets in your way. Physical items that you hold on to that instead of bringing you joy kind of weigh you down, that are packed away, as you said, in boxes that you have that just kind of sit there. They don't add joy or value to your life, but you also can't, for whatever reason, seem to remove them from your physical space. So, yeah.
I guess this stuff is just popping into my head because this is a great topic around our house.
Hit me.
Because I'm a kind of everything in its own place kind of character.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not a neat freak, but I think everything's got to be in its own place. And my wife is not. She's not.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, as I guess the most ubiquitous demonstration of clutter is the proverbial junk drawer. Everybody in the world has a junk drawer, right?
Yeah. Maybe.
No?
Yeah. Well, I mean, a junk drawer is basically probably the smallest measurable unit of clutter. And what you see in your junk drawer is what you see elsewhere, is that it's a jumble of things. You know, you said everything in its place. And maybe, yeah, there's a junk drawer. There's a drawer where smaller items can live. But within that drawer, you could have them organized into little slots, or they could just be a mishmash of stuff. So when you've got the mishmash, that's what you think of like junk drawer. Now, I grew up in a family that pretty much almost every drawer was a junk drawer.
Really?
Right.
Right.
So my drawers, when I think about it, I just envisioned my own kitchen and I'm thinking, well, no, we actually, we don't have a junk drawer. We've got a drawer where certain things go in certain drawers. And, that's pretty much it. Everything, having things that don't have homes. That's one of the things I teach when I do my, my decluttering coaching, is thinking about, well, where does that live? When you go, after you use it, after it does its little job, where does it go home? So that is one of the things that causes clutter.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it, because you're right. How does something wind up in the junk drawer? Not because it's junk. If it were junk, you'd just discard it, but because it has no other designated spot.
Yeah. Yeah.
So let me put it in the junk drawer. Okay. So, but from the junk drawer, we run into other problems that are much, much larger. So you, by the way, you are a former collector. You say your family was made up of collectors. So you've got a great position to talk about when collecting can be a wonderful thing, and it can be lucrative. It can be satisfying. But when does being a conscientious collector tip over into a kind of addiction to just accumulating things? Well, I collect salt shakers and now I have 2 million of them. When does that become a clutter problem?
Well, I think for everybody it's a little bit different, but I think one of the what do I want to say, guideposts about that is when you start to collect something, there's a certain energy, there's a certain discovery. I loved that notion of discovering and sharing the things that I was collecting. Like, oh, look what I just found, another one of these things. And I noticed, there was commonality and things like that. But to me, there's a tipping point. There's a certain point where instead of being delighted by it, it almost becomes an obligation. Like, oh, I collect, as you said, I collect salt and pepper shakers. So ergo, I guess I have to buy these salt and pepper shakers because I'm on vacation, and I buy and all of a sudden it goes from ooh to and then the light kind of goes out of it.
Yeah, it moves from a kind of pleasant hobby to a not a compulsion, but you're sort of now required. To accumulate this thing. I think we do that with sweaters and socks and all kinds of stuff. Like, well, I like sweaters. Let me buy another sweater, and pretty soon you've got sweaters everywhere. Mm-hmm. So you help people, and you're going to take us through some of the steps you show people that they can do as well to declutter. But before we do that, what's the big deal? What are the negative consequences of clutter?
Well, the interesting thing to me is that, some people, I could look at somebody could look at my house and say, who are you to talk about clutter? You've got stuff all around the place. Clutter becomes a negative thing when it impacts your life, when it stops you from doing things that you want to do, either physically or emotionally. A couple of examples I'll give you is this one was really powerful. I got this acronym from a woman I was coaching. I had never heard it before, which is crazy, but she said, well, do you know what chaos stands for? And I said, well, no. And CHAOS, can't have anyone over syndrome. And it blew my mind to think that, and I've heard that from people that they, it negatively affects your social connectivity. You can't ask people to come over to your house because you're embarrassed because you have clutter all over the place. You don't often, accept invitations for fear of then having to reciprocate. And the fact to me that there was this acronym that could be posted, printed on a t-shirt that seemed to be socially acceptable, like where people were like, yeah, I know what you're talking about, means that, that is a negative thing. It also costs you money when you are paying late fees because you've misplaced your bills. Have you seen how it seems like every place nowadays, when I drive around, turns into these cubes where you go and spend money to store your stuff because you've run out of places in your house, so you're paying sometimes to externally store the stuff that you have, or even just, I've heard people say it was easier for me to go and buy another whatever I had because I couldn't find the one that was supposed to be in my home. So I just went and bought another dress or another, iron or whatever it was, spending money on things, duplicating it because you can't find it around your house.
I'm sure there are also negative consequences to one's relationships, correct?
Oh, completely. Yeah. I mean, as you've said, and I've heard from many people, especially if there's a slightly more organized person in the relationship, or perhaps it is a parent who has the clutter and there's a child, you know what I mean? And I say parent child, I mean, I'm of the Gen X generation. So my mom's still alive. She's in her 80s, but there's those kinds of relationships where it's like this person has all this stuff. I know I want to help them with it. It's dragging them down. But if they don't see a problem with it, there can be a bit of conflict.
Yeah, yeah. And the solution to that is, of course, not two clutterers living together, because then you have, the worst possible situation.
Yeah.
I love chaos too. That acronym is perfect to describe the syndrome, but it also describes the nature of clutter. Clutter, by definition, is not an organized system of acquiring things. It's just stuff.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with George Carlin's very old now?
Yes, I am.
My stuff, your stuff, right?
Mm-hmm. My stuff is good stuff. Your stuff is junk.
I would have been out here a little bit sooner, but they gave me the wrong dressing room, and I couldn't find any place to put my stuff. And I don't know how you are, but I need a place to put my stuff. So that's what I've been doing back there, just trying to find a place for my stuff. You know how important that is. That's the whole meaning of life, isn't it? Trying to find a place for your stuff. That's all your house is. Your house is just a place for your stuff. If you didn't have so much goddamn stuff, you wouldn't need a house. You could just walk around all the time. That's all your house is. It's a pile of stuff with a cover on it. You see that when you take off in an airplane and you look down and you see everybody's got a little pile of stuff. Everybody's got their own pile of stuff. And when you leave your stuff, you gotta lock it up. Wouldn't want somebody to come by and take some of your stuff. They always take the good stuff. They don't bother with that crap you're saving. Ain't nobody interested in your 4th grade arithmetic papers. They're looking for the good stuff.
A couple of things about the pandemic I want to talk about, but you I guess before the pandemic would go to people's homes and help them with this.
I have on select times done that. That was more of like an informal thing I would do for decades. I would be the person that if somebody in the family passed away, I'd be the one to come in and kind of help them clean it out. But really what I realized when I was doing that, kind of in that notion of, you can bring a man a fish or you can teach him how to fish.
Right.
I could go in and I could clean out your house, but that's not solving the problem that's causing the clutter.
No.
As soon as I do that, if you don't deal with what is causing the clutter, your house is going to be cluttered again. So what I loved to do was especially during the pandemic where none of us were leaving our houses, is to think about, well, what are the causes of it? How can I help people without going into their house? And then help them discover why they have the clutter and teach them processes and methods to get decluttered and to stay decluttered.
Stay decluttered.
Yeah.
Because after all, you being the outside agent here had none of the baggage emotionally and psychologically that was causing the clutter in the first place. You could be very ruthless in a sense, because you had no attachment to these things. But you're right to point out, and it's very true of lots of compulsive behavior, that there's the behavior, and you can see it, but what's causing it?
Yeah.
So in that regard, before we get to your steps that you can help people with, I sent you an article, I know, last week when we were talking about doing a show about the relationship between clutter and trauma. And I know when I first saw the title of the article, I thought that's a little extreme. I mean, a trauma is something horrific and clutter is just a problem. But they make the point that this type of behavior can have an impact on brain chemistry. It can literally change the way you think.
Yeah.
Can you think of are there examples of that? I can give you a couple, but do you know what I mean? It can change the way you think.
Oh, completely. I mean, I think about thinking. The inability to concentrate, the distraction that never being able to focus on anything while you're surrounded by clutter, and how that causes such dissatisfaction in your life. Also, frankly, that constant low-lying hum and the barrage of negative self-talk, that anywhere your eyes land in your house is something that's telling you that you should be doing something else, that you should be cluttering and yet decluttering and yet you're not, that, I should be doing this, I should be doing that. And that, instead of motivating you, which I guess it's supposed to, is just that digs you down further. And so then, you resort to other things to make you feel better. Sometimes that shopping or acquiring, consuming more things to make you feel better, it becomes a vicious cycle.
It's amazing. I mean, you're right. Clutter, to put a fine point on this, is not some small thing. It can be, it can crush one's self-esteem.
Oh, yeah.
And make you feel less than good about yourself and kind of weak and what's wrong with me.
Mm-hmm.
No one's happy. People may be okay with clutter insofar as managing it, but have you ever run into anybody that was blissfully cluttering the place up who went, I don't care, who cares? Are there any people like that?
Well, I think there are some people, I mean, as I said, like your version of cluttered may be different from mine. I think so, somebody could look at, be like, I love all of my stuff that surrounds me. It brings me joy. It lights me up. And if they're saying that from a true point of having gone through and sorted through it and really kind of, as we like to say, separating the wheat from the chaff, your Goldilocks soft bed may be my just right, Mm-hmm. However, I think there are some people that, the word hoarder gets bandied about a lot. And you see it on TV.
What's the difference between a clutterer and a hoarder?
Well, I think honestly, it's just the sheer volume of stuff that people have in their homes, and that not discerning, it's just too much of everything,
mm-hmm.
And that notion of, you've kind of given up on trying to even pretend to want to take care of it,
let's talk about some of the things that you have to confront when you're helping somebody declutter.
Okay.
As a life coach.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the barriers you have to overcome and some of the belief systems you have to break down. I went to a nearby expert in clutter, my lovely wife, who said, "Oh my goodness, ask her this." She knows that this is a problem, and she over the years has gotten much better, still great at it, but there's still problems. Mm-hmm. So how do you overcome the emotions that are attached to certain items? She put it beautifully. She said, ask her how I can throw away a memory.
Well, here's what I would tell your wife lovingly is, first of all, reassure her, and I will reassure everybody, you are not throwing away the memory. You are not throwing away the person. You're not throwing away your feelings for them. We as human beings have this crazy ability to imbue inanimate objects with such meaning that, I could show you this pen and you may think I just bought it at Staples, but I could tell you that this is the pen that my something, it's so precious. And if I get rid of this, it means that I have, somewhere in me, something is telling me that if I throw away this pen, I am throwing away my father. So the thing I would pay attention to is to reassure that you're not throwing away the person or the feeling. However, listen to those stories in your own head. Who's telling you that story of telling you to cling on to it? The great thing is that we do have that ability to imbue things with story. Therefore, we can also extract that power. We can put a story into it. We can also remove it, and say it's really just a pen.
Remove the item, the story from the item, so that the item goes away, but the story remains. Completely.
And you have to remind yourself that people live in your stories, and your stories live in your head and your heart. And if at a certain age, like some of us are, your head and your heart get a little bit too much, you can also literally grab a little book and just write down to yourself, remember that time that Timmy made that little thing for Christmas and it was made out of this and whatever. And, you know, then if you ever want to be reminded of it, you just could read it, you know what I mean? Just jot down the prompt for the memory. The thing is not the memory. The thing is the thing that reminds you of what the story is in here. So you can easily, one of my tricks is to say, make a bullet point, you know, remember, you know, that Christmas ornament I got from Major Mudd when he came to St. Bartholomew's in 1973, you know, and then you're like, oh, I remember that. We went down there with the Blairs and it was so much fun.
Right. A catalog of the items I used to have.
Yeah.
And these are the stories that I still have. That's a great way to think about it.
Yeah.
Here's the second question she wanted to ask, and that is, how do you overcome the nagging sense that if I get rid of, how do I know I won't need this at some point down the road?
Isn't it interesting? Yeah. I think a lot of that comes from, I will say this, you had mentioned at one point, just all of us being alive at a certain point in US history. Mm-hmm. And many of us still have people in our lives that have that shadow of the original Great Depression, where there were things that you didn't have anything and you really needed to make do with such little, that there's that kind of for you know, just survival mechanism of holding on to things in case of, you know, that can be very, you know, you feel like you're smart. Oh, I don't have to worry about that. I have one of these things in here. The trick I would recommend is literally get yourself some Post-it notes, right? Put a Post-it note on something. The last time, you know, if you haven't used it in a while, put a Post-it note and say, use it by X. Or you say, when's the last time I used it? And last time you used it, just write the date on it and really say to yourself, you know, do I need that? Or the other thing too is if I pass this along, I really try hard. I'm trying to train my own self to say, not get rid of. But if I pass this along to somebody else, if I should need another one, could I easily get one? Could I borrow it from a friend? Could I buy one inexpensively? You know, when I need it versus holding on to all this stuff just in case, you know.
What a great tip. I mean, yes, there should be a end date, a shelf life, and it should be very easy for anyone to go, I haven't used this in 15 years. I'm not going to likely need it next month.
Yeah.
And then move on. That's a great tip. I will share both of those as soon as we are done. And that whole idea of scarcity, the sense that, you know, gee, if I lose it, I'll never get it back, is no longer a part of our lives. There's nothing we can't pretty much replace in terms of stuff. We're talking to Betty Lennon. Is it your father who's John Lennon?
Yes, my dad's name still is. He's gone, but he was a John Lennon. So, and I'm a huge Beatles fan, so that's very convenient.
How could you be anything else? Betty has a terrific website where she coaches people on the way out from under their clutter. You once collected roadmaps? Is that what you liked?
Well, I actually have a website that I do. I do collect roadmaps, but really, it's my website was Destination Decluttered is my current website. Mm-hmm. Retro Roadmap is where I basically actually collected cool vintage places from around the U.S. and told people about places to travel to. Hence the roadmap. And the funny thing is that during the COVID, I couldn't go anywhere. But I developed my own kind of internal roadmap to help people, you know, go on their own journey to decluttering. So that was kind of like creating a road trip, as it were, to help people with their clutter.
You know, that's interesting. And I don't want to put you on the spot because I don't know the answer to this myself.
The
word vintage comes up a lot.
Yeah.
I associate it immediately off the top of my mind with old. Mm-hmm. In other words, something that's vintage has to be a certain age, but that's probably not true. When we say something is vintage, thereby bonding us to it tighter? What are we talking? Are we actually talking about a real thing?
Well, there are actually, I mean, I know, for example, in the car world, a car has to be, I believe, 25 years to maybe be vintage. And then there's a certain number of years that goes by, and then it's an antique car. So there's kind of a hierarchy or a length of time, let's say. So you've got your antiques. I'm from Boston, so I would call those, they're wicked old, right? Wicked old stuff is antiques. Stuff that, at least when I started collecting and traveling and looking for places, that is a little bit more maybe the 1920s to the 1960s, though now I say 70s and probably 80s to some people. Like every year that a year goes past and a generation gets older, their idea of vintage is a lot closer than you think. If you think about the fact that Happy Days was, filmed in the 70s about the 50s, that's only a 20-year span. So now the places that our equivalent of Happy Days now would be something that was filmed in like the late 90s or early 2000s. Right. So it changes.
Yeah, you needn't remind me of that. It's too depressing. With regard to the pandemic,
yes,
and we're trapped in the house. On the one hand, you're not free to go out and accumulate more stuff, but on the other hand, you're suddenly stuck with your clutter.
Yeah.
What are you observing as to the impact of being shut in on clutterers?
Well, I think it depends on where they are in their journey. If they don't want to, don't feel like they can make a change, they are going to be surrounded by their clutter and probably feeling bad, in a low-lying version of it, forever. Like it's certainly putting on blinders. Stuff that they don't even see it anymore until they see it with fresh eyes and realize that they have piles all over the place. The other thing that's interesting too is we may not be able to go out and travel, but I mean, the ability to push a button and have something delivered to your house has never been more readily available and acceptable because it's kind of the safer way. So there's a danger there of people who try to fill their lives with meaning and kind of patch a hole, kind of fix something by shopping, that it can actually make it worse.
Yeah. Like everything else associated with this situation.
Yeah.
Made it worse. You're right. Boy, they're on the doorstep. Sometimes before it seems like you've ordered it, it's here.
Right.
Because after all, you were going to want it anyway.
Yeah.
So we just thought we'd send it to you. So all right. So let's give some people some hardcore advice. First of all, is it difficult for people to admit they have a problem? And if they do admit they have a problem, what's the first thing they should do?
Well, I think with anything in your life, it is always difficult to admit that you have a problem, because then you are admitting to yourself and the world that you are flawed or broken or somehow imperfect, right? So that's always tough for anybody, right? But the first thing I would say is, kind of get some help and get some support. First of all, know you're not alone. Know you're not alone. That so many people, you think your story, and I say this lovingly, you think your story is so unique, but it is really so common. You've got stuff that you've inherited from people. You tried to make yourself happy by shopping. You've got your kids' stuff here, or things that you used to like, you don't like them anymore, but you feel bad because you don't like them anymore, so you keep them. Really, realizing you're not alone, and realizing that honestly, getting some support and some guidance and some help with it is the easiest and quickest way to get you out from under it. Because if you think about it, the reason you became cluttered, one of the reasons is that perhaps you were never taught how to not be cluttered. You wouldn't ask somebody who doesn't know how to drive, how to teach you to drive. So, why would we expect people that may not have the best organizational processes when you've been surrounded by them? Why would they aren't going to be able to teach you certain, simple methods to keep yourself decluttered?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, that's just great advice. The idea that you're not alone in this sounds self-evident, but it's really not if you're in the middle of it. And I'm wondering if there are clutterers support groups where they exchange views and and try to lift each other up. You know, there is another phenomenon, and I'm going to let you go after we kick this around a little bit,
Sure.
where we began talking about the consumer culture we live in. And I know you're probably aware of this. There are many, many sites that have been around that sort of probably predate the social media phenomenon, where people who have an abundance of something, rather than throw it away or even donate it, they will set up an exchange where they'll say to someone else, I have too many of these and not enough of these. Would you be willing to swap? That's a way that you could declutter, isn't it?
Oh, of course. I mean, there are so many ways to declutter. I mean, as you referenced earlier, if I was to go into your house to declutter, I could do it in a few hours because I don't know the stories behind everything. I always say to people, the fastest way to declutter is to just rent a dumpster, put all the clutter in there. Of course, that's not what you want to do because you have the stories attached to them. And that's why I am a coach and I lovingly help people think of those things. But there are myriad ways of releasing the objects in your life that no longer bring you joy. And one of the great ways to ease that transition is to think about the joy you can bring somebody else, either somebody you know or somebody you don't even know. The joy you can bring simply by sharing the abundance of stuff that you have. You know, think about it. We can only have too much. You know, we sometimes we have too much. I can still survive on half of what I have and provide joy and delight or whatever it is that somebody else needs with half of what I have.
Yeah, you know, it's exactly right. And you know what else you have demonstrated in spades, that when you're interested in helping somebody, no matter what the problem may be, if you are not empathetic and compassionate, you're not going to help these people.
Oh, of course.
So it's great to hear you begin from that place where you've got to appreciate how people feel about their stuff before you can help them unclutter. You could do absolutely no better than to begin that process by visiting Betty Lennon's website. I hope I get it right. Destination Declutter.
Yep. DestinationDecluttered.com.
Decluttered.com.
Yes.
It'll be on the Corner's website. You'll be able to see that. Betty, thanks so much. It was really fun talking about this topic.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm glad. I appreciate the opportunity to share what I do. And I am so glad I got to answer your wife's questions because trust me, she's not the only one who has those.
Well, every now and then I'm able to accomplish something that she appreciates. And this will be one case. So you've made me a hero and I appreciate that. Betty Lennon, thanks so much for joining us on the Behavioral Corner. And maybe we can have you back sometime real soon.
I would love that.
And the rest of you, thanks for hanging with us. Straighten up your rooms and we'll see you next time. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook and like us there and do all that neat social media stuff. We'll catch you next time on the Behavioral Corner. Bye-bye.
Retreat Behavioral Health has proudly been serving the community for over 10 years. Here at Retreat, we believe in the power of connection and quality care. We offer comprehensive, holistic, and compassionate treatment from industry-leading experts. Call 855-802-6600 or visit us at www.retreatbehavioralhealth.com to begin your journey today.